Some children grow up worse than their parents, not in wrinkles or ailments, but in awareness. They grow up believing the world owes them everything, that you exist to serve them, that your life must pause whenever they raise their voice. And the most painful part isn't what they do, but what you've allowed in the name of love. Today we're going to talk about something no one dares to name, the emotional foolishness of some adult children. Not as an insult, but as a diagnosis. Because some behaviors aren't just immaturity or rebellion, they are clear signs that your child has lost their way and, without realizing it, is dragging you down with them. I'm going to show you 9 clear, brutal, and necessary signs. Some will hurt, others will set you free, but all of them will help you see whether what you're living is love or dependency in disguise. And the last one, believe me, might forever change the way you understand your place as a mother. I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. Stay with me until the end, not out of curiosity, but out of dignity. Have you ever felt guilty for demanding respect? As if setting boundaries with your child were almost a sin. As if saying, "I won't allow this," meant you were somehow failing as a mother. It's an old trap, but a very effective one. While you wear yourself out giving everything, he believes he owes you nothing. And that, painful as it is to admit, is a form of emotional foolishness. We're at the first point on this journey, and we can't avoid it. He believes you owe him everything, but he doesn't know how to show gratitude. Some children go through life convinced they deserve everything they have, as if your sacrifices were an eternal obligation, not an act of free, loving choice. They feel entitled to judge you, demand from you, ignore you, and all without giving back the slightest thing. Not a kind word, not a sincere call, not a gesture of gratitude. Only complaints, calculated silence, or self-serving appearances. This isn't love. This is an elegant form of emotional parasitism. Stoicism teaches us that what is given without measure, without awareness, without reciprocity, ends up being despised. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes a slave to what it tolerates unjustly." And you, many times, have tolerated contempt disguised as need. You've given your time, your body, your life, hoping one day he'd see it, understand it, value it. But there's something more painful than waiting, realizing that recognition may never come. Imagine yourself as a deep well that's offered water for years, clean, steady, generous. But the day comes when those who drink from you not only stop thanking you, they start polluting you. They throw in trash, demand more, insult you when the water isn't just the right temperature. And still, you remain open, available, hoping they'll remember how much you've sustained them. But a well also runs dry. And when it does, it's not just the water that dies, it's the dignity. The problem isn't that your child is evil. The problem is he's grown up without understanding that gratitude is the foundation of every healthy relationship. He thinks you're the one in debt, as if bringing him into the world were a lifelong sentence. And you, out of fear, habit, or mismanaged love, have let him believe that fantasy. But today, right here, you're facing a truth you can't avoid any longer. If your child doesn't know how to be grateful, he doesn't deserve privileges. He doesn't deserve your health, your time, or your peace. Because respect at this age is non-negotiable. And you weren't put on this earth to beg for love, not even from the one you gave life to. This is the first mirror, and perhaps the most uncomfortable. But it's also the beginning of new clarity. You are not alone, and you are not wrong for expecting respect. You're waking up, and that, even if it bothers those who take advantage of your kindness, is the bravest thing you can do. If you've already realized that you can't go on living at the service of an ungrateful child, then you also need to face the next wound head-on. Because there's something that hurts just as much as ingratitude, being treated like you're stupid. Not by strangers, but by the very child you raised, cared for, and stood by through their worst days. We've reached the second key point in this video. He talks to you like you're stupid. This isn't a minor detail. It's one of the quietest forms of contempt. Sometimes it shows in the tone, an impatient, condescending voice, like someone correcting a clumsy little girl. Other times, it's in the decisions. They exclude you from important conversations, ignore your opinion, cut you off with lines like, "You don't get it," or "That's not for you anymore." As if age were a kind of mental disability. But the truth is something else. You understand far more than they think. You've just learned to stay quiet, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, to protect a bond they no longer care for. Stoicism speaks of inner wisdom as a fruit that doesn't make noise, but reveals itself through calm. Seneca taught that maturity is learning to see without needing to comment on everything. But there's a big difference between choosing silence out of wisdom and being silenced by arrogance. Many children, especially those trapped in their own insecurity, build an image of you as outdated, weak, or incapable of understanding the modern world. And from that place, they justify their mistreatment. They explain everything to you like you're ignorant, forgetting that you faced pain they couldn't even imagine. You fought inner wars, held households together with empty hands, forgiven the unforgivable. And still, they look down on you. Take a moment to really think about this. How many times have you walked away from a conversation feeling smaller, more useless, more dimmed than before? How many times have you doubted your own intelligence because your child, with that look of annoyance, made you feel ridiculous? That's not a generational gap. That's contempt. And like all contempt, it has a root, the inability to recognize you as an emotional authority. Because if they saw you for who you are, sharp, strong, complex, they'd have to question their own choices. They'd have to admit they don't know everything, that they still have much to learn, and that maybe the mirror that makes them most uncomfortable is you. But here's the truth no one's told them. You're not less because you've lived more. You're more aware, more grounded, more free. And if you choose not to speak, it's not because you can't. It's because you've learned that not everything deserves your energy. On a spiritual level, there's a deep lesson. A voice that goes quiet out of love is not weak. It's sacred. But when that silence becomes routine and no one listens to you or asks your opinion anymore, the soul begins to dim. And you weren't born to grow silent in the most wise stage of your life. It's time to wake up. Not to yell or fight, but to reclaim your place. The next time your child talks to you like you don't understand, look at him calmly and say, "I was a mother before you even knew how to speak. I've lived long enough to know when someone needs humility." Because at this stage in life, it's not about proving anything. It's about the world, and especially those you've loved the most, seeing you with the respect you've already earned. And if they don't, then it's time to remember that your voice is still alive, and it still has much more to say than they're willing to hear. After being treated like you don't understand anything, many women start to retreat into a routine of silence and resignation. But that retreat isn't peace, it's emotional exile. And the most dangerous part is that over time, you get used to it. You get used to not being asked, not being included, only being called when it's convenient for them. This brings us to the third point in this journey, one that reveals the true quality of your bond with your adult child. He only shows up when he needs something. And yes, it's as common as it is devastating. We've reached the third point in this video, and this is where things start to shift, because this kind of behavior isn't corrected with more giving, but with a radical change in how you respond. The Stoic strategy is clear. Don't confuse presence with affection or need with love. When a child only comes to ask, to demand, to take advantage, they're not seeking their mother, they're seeking an emotional resource. You are not an ATM or an on-call therapist. You are a person with dignity, with boundaries, with a story. And if someone refuses to see that, then it's time to start withdrawing your energy. Seneca said, "He who gives without measure loses the value of what he offers." That's why the practical strategy here is not to argue or confront, but to observe clearly and choose firmly. The next time he reaches out only out of self-interest, don't respond immediately. Give yourself permission to assess, does this nourish me or drain me? If you choose to help, do it consciously, not out of guilt. And if you choose to say no, let it be with calm, not with apologies. Because every yes you give unwillingly is a no you're giving to yourself. Imagine your home had a single door, and every time someone walked through it, they left behind dirt, noise, and chaos. You clean, rearrange, restore the order. But the next day, they return with the same attitude. When do you decide to close that door, or at least install a lock? Your soul needs boundaries too, and the intermittent presence of someone who only shows up to take is a form of invasion. It's not love, it's use. And you weren't born to be used by anyone, not even your children. If you feel that these words reflect your story, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Not out of habit, but because every bit of support helps us keep creating these spaces for deep reflection. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from and write the phrase, "My energy is sacred," if you're ready to stop being just someone else's support system. There are still crucial points ahead in this video, and the final sign may forever change how you see what you deserve at this stage of your life. Stay with me. Things are just starting to gain momentum. When someone only reaches out to you out of self-interest, the next step is often even more subtle and dangerous. They start to use you emotionally. Not with shouting or outright demands, but with a form of manipulation disguised as need, affection, even unresolved pain. And many times, you fall into that trap without realizing it because you still believe that being a mother means enduring, accommodating, pleasing. But there's a line that should never be crossed. And once it is, what comes next is this fourth point that we need to face with absolute clarity. He uses your guilt as a tool for control. This kind of bond doesn't form overnight. It weaves itself slowly, like an invisible web. It starts with phrases that seem harmless. "If only you'd been more present. You never understood me the way I needed. I'm like this because of you." Words that strike without raising their voice, awakening that old wound many women carry silently. Motherly guilt. That feeling that you could have done more, that something went wrong, that maybe you deserve this treatment because you made mistakes. But here's the truth no one tells you. Having made mistakes doesn't make you eternally guilty. It makes you human. And no one, absolutely no one, has the right to use your flaws to gain power over you. Stoic philosophy warns us about emotional attachments that don't stem from love, but from fear. Epictetus said that those who fear losing something live in chains, and you, many times, have lived chained to the fear of losing your child, the fear that he'll drift away, judge you, or one day shut you out. But that fear isn't respect, it's submission. And the guilt he imposes on you isn't real. It's a tool he's learned to use so that you never say no, so that you keep giving, yielding, fading away. This mental trap is especially dangerous because it settles in silently. It doesn't arrive with insults, but with prolonged silences, calculated distance, that expression of disappointment that hurts so much. He doesn't say it outright, but you feel like you're losing him, and so you do whatever it takes to win him back. And whatever it takes often means betraying yourself, postponing your desires, silencing your voice, accepting crumbs in exchange for a peace that never comes. That's how this imposed guilt starts to erode your autonomy. You no longer make decisions for yourself, you make them out of fear of disappointing. You no longer set boundaries because you're afraid he'll walk away. And every time you give in, you drift further away from yourself. There's a very old spiritual saying, where there is guilt, there is no freedom. And this is what you need to reclaim, your inner freedom. Not to stop loving, but to love with awareness, not with fear. You have the right to look at your child and say, yes, I made mistakes, but that doesn't give you the right to manipulate me. Because if that bond only exists based on what you endure, then it's not a bond. It's emotional dependence in disguise. And at this stage in your life, you deserve something far greater. You deserve relationships where you can breathe, not chains that suffocate you from within. Unprocessed guilt becomes a weapon others can use. But once you see it, name it, and confront it, it loses its power. And then you begin to reclaim what matters most, your emotional dignity. And that, believe me, is priceless. When you live trapped in guilt, what usually follows is even more exhausting. You start walking on eggshells. You're afraid to say something, ask for something, make a decision, because you know that any move might trigger an outburst, a tantrum, or a punishing silence. And that brings us to the fifth point, one that slowly wears down your ability to stand tall. He plays the victim when you set boundaries. At this point, we're not talking about normal disagreements between mother and son. We're talking about a toxic dynamic where love becomes emotional blackmail and respect vanishes the moment you dare to say, enough. This kind of reaction, where your child takes offense every time you act independently, is a clear sign of emotional immaturity. His ego, both inflated and fragile, sees your dignity as an attack, your silence as rejection, your boundary as betrayal. And you, afraid of losing him, back down. You cancel plans, give in during arguments, downplay your needs. You do it to keep the peace, but that peace is fake. It's a calm bought with your sacrifice. And every time you stay quiet to avoid conflict, the message he receives is the same. I can keep treating her this way. She always comes back. This victim mentality has deep roots. It often stems from unhealed wounds, childhood voids, a worldview where everything revolves around him. But you are not responsible for fixing that. You're not here to compensate for every lack or to excuse every outburst. And you're certainly not here to keep being the target of his emotional immaturity. If you can't say, I don't want to, without him playing the victim, then that relationship isn't healthy. It's a prison of imposed expectations, and you're the one serving the sentence. Now, undoing this isn't easy. There are no magic words or heroic gestures. What's needed is an inner decision, firm and calm. Stop being afraid of discomfort, because yes, setting boundaries will hurt. He'll get angry, blame you, maybe even distance himself for a while. But it's in that space that you start to breathe again, that you begin to think clearly, that you stop living according to his moods. And in that silence, you realize you didn't die, that you can be alone without feeling guilty, that you can say this isn't good for me and keep walking, even if he doesn't like it. Here's the mindset you need to adopt. You are not an endless source of comfort. You are a person who deserves respect, even if you no longer have the strength to argue. And if your child can't tolerate your boundaries, then the problem isn't your decision. It's his immaturity. Real respect isn't asked for, it's practiced. And if he doesn't practice it, then you have the right and the responsibility to step back emotionally. Not as punishment, but as self-protection. Because there are moments in life when staying silent is no longer noble, it's destructive. And this may be one of those moments. After so much giving in out of fear, after silencing your own desires again and again just to avoid your child playing the victim, there comes a moment when you quietly ask yourself, who am I now? You don't say it out loud, but you feel it every time you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the woman staring back. Because when you've lived for years entirely for others, the day eventually comes when your identity dissolves into everyone else's expectations. The most painful part isn't the physical exhaustion. It's that constant feeling of being out of place. And this is the moment when we have to confront one of the deepest signs of an emotionally blind child. He believes his pain justifies everything he does. So here we are at the sixth point in this journey, and there's no gentle way to put it. Many children carry wounds they use as a shield to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. I went through so much, they say. You don't understand what I lived through. And under the umbrella of that pain, real or exaggerated, they allow themselves to belittle you, yell at you, ignore you, emotionally wear you down. But suffering doesn't give anyone the right to destroy others. Pain is not an excuse for mistreatment, and you are not obligated to sit there as a passive spectator in a story where he's always the victim and you're always the one to blame. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this scene. You're sitting across the table from your adult son. He speaks harshly, throws old accusations at you, makes you feel like you've been an inadequate mother. You listen, nod, lower your gaze. But inside, something is screaming, because you know you gave more than you had, that you were there when he was falling apart, that you fed him even when you went without. And yet, none of that seems to matter. He's crafted a story where you're always in the red, and if you don't break that narrative, it will keep growing until it turns you into the shadow of a life that no longer feels like your own. Staying in this dynamic leads to one place only: emotional loneliness. It doesn't matter how many people are around you. If they all see you as the cause of their pain, you end up feeling alone, even in a crowd. And that is one of the cruelest ways to live in your later years, with the weight of others on your shoulders and no right to say enough. Every time you justify the unjustifiable out of compassion, you lose a little bit of clarity. And every time you let your child's past destroy your present, you're giving up the only time that truly belongs to you. Now, the answer isn't to stop loving, it's to love with truth. Stoicism puts it bluntly: someone else's suffering is not an excuse to lose your own virtue. You can be present without carrying the burden. You can be understanding without accepting abuse. You can look at your child with compassion, but also with strength, because if you don't, no one else will. And if you don't do it now, it may be too late. So look at yourself honestly and ask, how many more years am I going to give up my peace to support a story that erases me? The answer isn't out there, it's within you. And the time to choose differently begins today. When you live trapped in someone else's narrative, justifying their pain, enduring their contempt, and giving up your place in the name of guilt, there comes a moment when you no longer know if you're being a good mother or just a useful figure in the life of someone who no longer respects you. You've faced 6 hard truths, each one revealing a pattern, a wound, a form of exhaustion you can't keep ignoring. But if there's one symptom that sums up all the others, it's the one you're about to hear. We've reached the 7th point in this journey, and it may be the most heartbreaking of all. He believes you have nothing left to teach him. When a son convinces himself that his mother is irrelevant, not because of her age, but because of her perspective on life, something essential is lost. And you, if you believe that, if you lower your voice, if you quietly step aside, you're erasing yourself from your own story. The arrogance with which some adult children dismiss you, that modern-sounding superiority, is not maturity. It's ignorance. An ignorance rooted in the belief that everything that came before must be replaced, cancelled, or outgrown. And there you are, with a whole life behind you, with scars that carry lessons, with a clarity that doesn't need fancy words, and yet you stay silent, because they've made you feel like you no longer matter, that your ideas are outdated, that your spirituality is naive, that your silence is disconnection, not wisdom. But the truth is something else entirely. Your presence, when you're in touch with yourself, brings order. Your words, when spoken from your center, can open eyes that have been shut for years. And your experience, if you claim it as treasure, holds more value than any modern theory about emotions. The problem is, too often, you've given up that inner authority, out of exhaustion, out of fear of conflict, or simply because no one seemed to acknowledge it. And that's where the self-deception begins. You think silence is peace, but it's not. Staying silent when you have something to say is a form of abandonment. Stoicism isn't about silently enduring everything. It's about acting from truth, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Marcus Aurelius wasn't wise because he tolerated everything. He was wise because he spoke when the truth demanded it. And today, your truth needs to be spoken. Not as a desperate cry, but as a firm affirmation. I still have something to say. I still have something to teach. I'm still alive. Because if you don't reclaim that space, if you don't see yourself as the source of wisdom you truly are, you'll keep occupying a lukewarm corner in other people's lives. And life at this stage isn't meant for corners. It's meant for presence. Look back for a moment. Think about what you've endured, what you've forgiven, the times you got back up alone, with no one there to see your tears. Is someone really going to come now and tell you you're no longer valuable? And are you really going to believe them? No, not anymore. The transformation you need doesn't begin when they change. It begins when you stop justifying the unjustifiable, when you stop waiting to be validated, when you stop acting as if you have nothing powerful left to give. Because as long as you're alive, your voice still carries weight, your story still teaches, and your presence, when it's steady, still guides. Even if it makes some people uncomfortable, even if they don't say it, even if they deny it with words, deep down, they know. And now so do you. After reclaiming your voice and realizing you still have something to teach, you can't stop there. Because respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you command with your very presence. And nothing destroys it faster than contempt disguised as jokes, corrections, or moral superiority. It's time to clearly face one of the most painful ways to be devalued. We've reached the 8th point in this video. He mocks your faith, your habits, or your way of seeing life. And if you've allowed it, even just once, you know how deeply that wound can cut. Some children, with their updated thinking, trendy vocabulary, and recycled ideas from popular books, believe they have the right to laugh at what keeps you grounded. They make ironic comments about your spiritual words, belittle your quiet moments, dismiss your view of life like it's just the whim of an old woman, and you, sometimes, stay quiet. Not because you have no answers, but because you don't want to argue. But every time you allow it, you lose a little more of your inner space. You let them laugh at your roots. You let them profane your personal temple. And that, whether or not you shout, hurts. Because there is nothing more offensive than someone laughing at what is sacred to you. The first act of defense you must take is both simple and profound. Don't justify yourself. Don't explain your faith. Don't adjust your habits to fit their modern mindset. If you choose to give thanks to God in the morning, with a cup of tea in your hand and a silent prayer, no one has the right to make fun of that. If you find meaning in spirituality, in routine, in the small rituals that bring order to your days, that doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. Because in the midst of chaos, you've found a way to stay grounded, and anyone who mocks that isn't superior, they're ignorant. What you can do starting today is draw an invisible but firm line. The next time you notice that mocking laugh, that dismissive comment, that condescending look, meet it calmly and say, "What you're mocking is what keeps me standing." You don't need to understand it, just respect it. That sentence, said with calm strength, can shift the entire dynamic. Because when a child realizes they can no longer freely mock what matters to you, they start to see you differently. not by magic, but by boundaries. But for that action to have power, you need to hold on to a clear mindset. You are not here to convince anyone. You are here to fully inhabit yourself, your spirituality, your faith, your rituals. They're not decoration. They are foundation. And if someone doesn't respect them, they don't get in. It's that simple. No one has the right to mock your soul. Not your child, not anyone. And if you don't protect it, no one else will. Because respect begins at home. And if you don't honor your way of life, why would anyone else? The change isn't about promising to stop tolerating mockery. The real change is standing your ground, even when it hurts, even if they walk away, even if the silence feels heavy. Because it's in that moment you affirm yourself and finally understand that dignity isn't something you argue for. It's something you live. After drawing clear boundaries, reclaiming your spiritual voice and saying, "I won't allow this," comes the hardest part. Holding that line when no one applauds you for it, when your child pulls away, when those around you don't understand, when the silence feels heavier than conflict. And it's right there, in that space, that a dangerous excuse shows up. A justification that sounds reasonable, but is the most poisonous thought for your growth. It's not worth it anymore. That brings us to the 9th point in this journey, perhaps the most paralyzing of all. He believes you have nothing left to teach him. And if you believe that too, then you're giving up before you've even begun. This idea doesn't show up all at once. It slips in quietly through phrases that sound harmless. "I'm too old for this." What's the point in speaking if no one listens? "I don't have the energy for conflict anymore." But what's behind those words isn't peace, it's resignation. It's a subtle way of giving up on yourself, of justifying your emotional stillness. And the most damaging part is, while you keep telling yourself you have nothing left to offer, your child starts to believe it too. He gets comfortable in his arrogance. He feels entitled to ignore you, to devalue your experience, to act as if you're just in the way. And without realizing it, your silence validates his behavior. The problem isn't just external, it's inside. You've started to believe that time is running out, that the respect you never got will never come, that your only option is to endure until the end, hoping one day he'll change. But that kind of hope, if not backed by action, becomes a cage. And you weren't put on this earth to die waiting. You're here to decide how to live this final stretch with clarity, with strength, with truth, even if it hurts, even if it costs you. Stoicism doesn't talk about age, it talks about choice. Epictetus didn't ask how old someone was when they wanted to change. He asked how much will they were willing to put into it. And that's the only thing you need right now. Will. The will to say what you've never said. To set boundaries even if your voice shakes. To stay silent when before you begged. To stop justifying the unjustifiable. And to finally start living with self-respect. Don't be fooled by the thought that you have nothing left to teach. You carry an entire story. A perspective that's seen more than most could bear. A resilience that can't be learned from books or bought in a course. But none of that means anything if you don't recognize it in yourself first. If you keep waiting for others to validate it, you'll lose what's left of your emotional dignity. Today, there's no room for half measures. Either you recognize yourself as a wise, capable, valuable woman, or you'll keep being treated as someone who doesn't matter. And deep down, you know that's not true. You know it in your core. You just need to remember it every day, with every decision, with every word. Because teaching isn't about giving lectures, it's about living with integrity, and that, at any age, has a power no one can deny, not even a son who's forgotten where he came from. If you've made it this far, it's because deep down, you know something in your life can't go on the same way. You're not listening to this for entertainment. There are open wounds, postpone decisions and truths that finally need to be faced. What you saw today wasn't a checklist to label your son, it was a mirror, so you could see yourself clearly and decide whether you'll keep being a spectator or finally reclaim your rightful place. This isn't a comforting message, nor an invitation to graceful resignation. It's a necessary confrontation, because growing older isn't exile, it's a stage of clarity. But only if you dare to stop justifying the unjustifiable, to let go of inherited guilt, and to say out loud, "I deserve respect, here, now, no conditions." Not everyone makes it to the end. Not everyone dares to hear the truths that make them uncomfortable. But you did, and that already says something about you. That's why I want you to write it down. Leave a comment with your country and the phrase, "I won't die waiting," because that's what you promised yourself today. You won't stay in the place where you're erased, where you're used, where people laugh at what gives your life meaning. You're going to make decisions, and you'll do it without asking for permission. My name is Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. This channel doesn't exist to decorate your day or make you feel good at any cost. It exists to tell you what no one else dares to say, with respect, with clarity, with truth. Because I know you don't need pity disguised as content. You need direction, and that's what we're going to keep building here, word by word, truth by truth. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. This channel isn't for everyone. It's for those who've decided to wake up. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it to them. Sometimes, one sentence is enough to change the course of an entire life. Stay here just a moment longer. 2 videos will appear on screen that follow this same path. One of them might be the final piece of the reflection that started moving in you today. Don't leave in silence. Choose to keep walking. Because the path, if you take it with purpose, can still lead you to a place where you recognize yourself again. And that is worth everything.